Well, hello there, little one. I heard that you were too sick to go to school today.
Yeah, Grandpa, I'm not feeling too well. Do you think you could read me a story?
A story? I think I can do that. This is the story my grandpa used to read to me whenever I was sick. Once upon a time, there were three men, Abel, Baker, and Charlie, who lived alone on an island. The island was a rough place with no luxuries. In particular, food options were extremely limited. The menu consisted of just one item, fish.
Ew, I hate fish.
Well, if that's all there was to eat, I'm sure you would eat it. Abel, Baker, and Charlie spent all day trying to catch fish to eat. They could only catch one fish a day, which was just enough for them to survive. One day, Abel gets tired of fishing and wants to make something that will allow him to catch fish easier. He spends all day working on it and doesn't have time to fish. His friends make fun of his efforts and tell Abel he's wasting his time and going hungry for nothing.
So what happened? What'd he make?
I'm getting to that. The next day, Abel comes to the beach with a net, and much to the surprise of his friends, Abel catches a fish, and then another fish. Abel now no longer needs to go fishing every day. Baker and Charlie became envious. They ask Abel to lend them the net so they too can have a day off. Abel decides instead to lend each friend a fish so they can spend a day to construct their own net without going hungry. In return, they would each owe Abel the principal plus one fish of interest.
Principal? Interest? What kind of book are you reading me, Grandpa?
Why, it's the classic tale of a fishing community as it relates to the U.S. economy and the 2008 debt crisis, of course.
Wait, what?
You see, little one, this was the first form of capitalism on the island. Abel lends them each a fish, not to improve their standard of living, but so he can have extra fish. Although his intentions were not to better society, it did. Instead of each catching one fish per day, his investment, first in the net, then in his two friends, led to an increase in the island's productive capacity, where now they can catch six fish.
Why did Abel need to get an extra fish from his friends? Couldn't he have just been nice?
Well, sure, I suppose so, but with no need to pay Abel back, they may have used that time for leisure rather than building a net. If they do that, no one is better off than they were before. Anyway, jumping ahead a number of years, the island has grown much larger in population, and there are more people like Abel who want to invent something so they can spend less time fishing.
Wait a second. Didn't you say there were only 3 men on the island? How'd the population grow?
Well, you see, there was an island of three women going through an eerily similar circumstance that found the way to our island.
That seems convenient.
Are you going to let me continue the story or not? Okay, where was I now? Oh, yes, here. More people wanted to start projects, but the problem was no one person had enough fish saved up to take the time to do it. The citizens want to borrow from each other, but this is hard for them to coordinate. One islander comes up with a brilliant idea, and I'll skip the boring stuff here. It was a bank. You see, the banker came up with the idea because he thought he could earn a profit in the form of interest, and all he would have to do was convince the people that they could earn a little bit of interest by leaving the fish with him. He would then turn it around and use this money to lend to large projects. Again, just like before, the bank was conceptualized by a capitalist interested in earning profit, but resulted in a boost to the economy as people around the island now able to borrow to create value.
So what is the deal with interest?
Well, because lower interest rates generate demand for borrowing and higher interest rates generate demand for saving, a society where interest rates are lower tends to represent a healthy economy. Businesses also want lower rates because it's cheaper for them to borrow money. This means that they will push politicians to reduce the rates of the central bank. Unfortunately, this causes a feedback loop where the economy appears healthy but really isn't. And having prolonged artificially low interest rates creates fake booms with huge busts.
I'm sorry I asked. Can we get back to the story?
Our little island has grown so much by this point that they've started trading with other islands around them. Where our island is specialized in making nets, the others may be specialized in making canoes. With free trade across borders, both societies are able to use their competitive advantages for the benefit of both islands. With free, unhindered capitalism, both societies gain and better each other by providing what the other couldn't or would be less efficient at. But some of the businesses on our island are afraid that the foreign islands are able to make similar products for cheaper. They go to the chiefs and they demand they do something to keep local businesses safe. You see, trade suffers as soon as businesses push for government intervention in industries where it may be more efficient to produce overseas. As government tries to protect local jobs, the benefits of free trade are ignored and hidden costs are passed to the consumers in the form of restricted choice.
What does that mean?
Well, suppose you want to buy a t-shirt. If a foreign manufacturer can deliver a t-shirt for less than it can be produced domestically, then you can buy the cheaper t-shirt with the money left over to spend on other things. If government imposes restrictions, however, those savings are lost as you are forced to purchase the more expensive product and the ability to pay for other things is gone. Back to the story. As our little island continues to grow and grow, there begins to be more and more demand for housing and education. These things cost more fish than any one islander has been able to save, so they went to the bank to take out loans. The loans varied from person to person, just as the risk of repayment varied from person to person. The island government, looking at this, thought that owning a house and getting an education should be something everyone could afford, and the high interest rates that some people needed to pay made that difficult. So the chief got together with his council and began backing all mortgages and student debt.
That's good.
Well, yes and no. By buying mortgages and student loan debt, the island government allowed these financial institutions to give loans with very low interest rates. All the loans were backed by the government, so there was no concern on the bank for default. This was taken a step further by reducing the need to make a down payment. This meant that people were able to take out larger loans and conversely caused the cost of schools and homes to increase. Sellers and universities knew that they could generate more profit by increasing the price, as the size and availability of loans was no longer a deterrent.
You mean people took advantage of the availability to credit?
They most certainly did. In the 100 years between 1900 and 2000, home prices in the U.S. increased by an average of 3.4%, which is slightly higher than inflation. This is because prices were dependent on income and credit availability. During the time between 1997 and 2006, prices rose an average of 19.4%, over which time income hardly moved. The main change that caused this massive growth was credit availability. This put the pieces in place to create a bubble, as these investments were now viewed as vital to one's future. Further compounding the problem, banks and other loans agencies wanted to increase the amount of loans even more, lobby for tax incentives, making the sale of a house largely tax-free and the interest paid on a mortgage tax-deductible. This created a market where people were looking to buy and sell houses for a profit. Even if the individual couldn't afford the house, they would buy the house with the intentions of selling quickly for a profit.
Is that similar to Abel and his net?
Well, aren't you bright? This too was a capitalist idea, as there was no intention to benefit anyone but the individual. And unlike Abel, where the capitalist behavior was able to spur economic growth by adding productive capacity, this market acted as a drain on societal resources.
So what happened with the loans on the island?
Well, on our island, similar to what happened in the real world, due to banks and loan agencies lobbying the government to back housing loans and making them more affordable, people had been able to purchase houses they had no way of paying back. Once the economy reached a point where people were no longer able to flip houses, they had little to no reason to continue to pay for the mortgages. They weren't on the hook for anything, so they just stopped paying.
How could the island government get of all that debt?
Well, the island, recognizing the errors of their ways, decided enough was enough. They were unable to pay off their debt, both to the banks and foreign islands. They were forced to default. This led the islanders through a time of hardship. Over time, with responsible leadership, the island's economy recovered and the people were prosperous once more. Only this time, it wasn't due to bad policies artificially inflating it.
Wow, Grandpa. So is that what's happening in the U.S. now, too?
Unfortunately, no. As the U.S. economy started to rebalance, capitalists and governments mistook the correction as the problem, lobbying and implementing policies to encourage spending once more, forgetting that the economy doesn't grow because people spend because the economy grows.
The U.S. could sure learn something or two from our island friends.
They sure could, dear. They sure could.